I'm going to be covering the second part of the overview of the elm-antd project. So that goes over only what's inside the showcase. Again, if you want to learn about other stuff, such as some overview of the ant project itself, or sorry, the ant package or library itself, head over to part one. And yeah, I would really appreciate any feedback. Did I miss anything? Do I say a lot? Any feedback is very appreciated. Uh, and then here is the actual project. So let me actually collapse this and start from the root of the Elm project. So you can see that there's two files here called showcase and visual tests, and there's no main.elm. So that might be one of the first things that throws people off um, when looking at this code. And the reason that this is the case is that you don't actually need a main in or like in a main file in Elm projects. So you can see that when there's a visual testing mode, I'm requiring the visual test file, which exports a Elm field in an object. And for some reason for some reason I did a different pattern. I chose not to do structure for some strange reason. But the idea is the same. So depending on the visual modes, I'm either starting from visual tests as like the root of my project, or then I start from showcase as the root of my project. But yeah, you don't actually need a main.elm file, but you do need a main function. So for example, if I go to visual tests, you'll see that I am exposing a main function, and that's sort of what kicks things off. Okay, so let's see if I go to the showcase.elm file, I can kind of walk people through this. So the showcase.elm file is actually relatively small compared to the router. So you'll see that this. So again, remember this is like the root of this project here, right? Um, and so at the root of this project, like the application technically only has 3 different kinds of messages. There's a router message, which is like basically 99% of all the different messages that occur in this. So like when I click on a button, when I click here, when I click here, basically all of the actions, or like 99% of the actions that can be performed by a user of the application, are most likely going to be a router message. Then there's URL changed. So if I click here, or if I go to a different URL, these are going to or like those actions are going to trigger a URL changed message. And lastly, there's a link clicked. So actually, I'm getting all my Elm concepts mixed up. So when I click on a link, the first thing that's going to happen is that Elm's going to invoke this message, and then we're going to decide, was that link referencing an internal URL? Like, am I trying to like redirect just to a different path in the same URL, or am I going to an entirely different URL? So for example, here I'm, if I'm clicking on, what would be an example actually? I have an example. If I click on these LA links, you can see in the bottom left corner that it's like Chrome is warning me that this is taking me outside of this URL. And so Elm handles that here. So here I'm just going to load the URL and sort of just like transition away. Although, actually, yeah, I don't even know if this even gets called ever, because all the hyperlinks have the target blank property, so they actually open a different tab. So maybe that doesn't get called at all. But conceptually, that's just what this is. If we leave here, actually before I do that, maybe I should see if there's anything else that's of interest. Yeah, I mean, it's like, your Elm browser application. There's this function called update router, which is really important. This function, like, as you can see, is being called on 2 out of the 3 different messages that occur in this application. And what it's doing is calling router.update. So I think we should just get into the router and yeah, just go from there. And also, yeah, like the view logic is also handled by the router. So although this is the root of the Elm app, the heart of it isn't really this file, it's actually the router. So let's open up the router. Okay, so the router exposes your model, your message, init, update, and view. So initially it's pretty straightforward, but there is quite a bit going on. So I guess I'll start with the model. So the router, first and foremost, is keeping track of what page we're on. So every time I change pages, the router is aware of that. A route is simply a type alias to a string. So I think what's happening is that I literally just save this value. Although, yeah, so I think this is just home. This would be home. So like, this would just be like that. Examples fetched. So there's some, like, I needed to track, I'm trying to remember why I did this, but I think the reason this would occur, or the reason I had to add this value, is that when I fetch code examples from the backend, so suppose that Elm just did a HTTP request to fetch the examples, the source code for these examples. If I transition away, and then if I go back, Elm needs to know if we've already fetched those or not. And so this simply just keeps track of that. This is some other related stuff to the commit hash and the file server URL related to the example fetching. So when we build out the showcase project, we embed the commit hash of the build, and then when this gets released to Netlify, there's a literal commit hash that's built into this project, and the front end will then send the commit hash to the back end, and then the back end will know exactly like what version of the source code to fetch. And in development, this is it's null. So we're always fetching whatever is in the file system in development. So you'll see that commit hash is a maybe. That's why I modeled it using maybe. And then footer, there's state in the footer because of this cute little color picker here. Okay, and then there's all the different models for the actual pages. So whatever page we're on, that has its own models. So what page are we on? Button. So you'll see that there's a button page model. So there's all this state that's specific to the button page. Then we model all the different messages that could occur. So you can see that every page also has its own messages that could occur. Let's see. Yeah, so there's a message that gets invoked when we receive the examples. And then there's the unimplemented components list. So you'll see that like 90% of the components aren't implemented yet. And so the way I built out this logic was that I simply listed out all the different components. So you can see here, pretty big list of unimplemented components. And there's this utility view that I made called not implemented. And so that view is what renders this. Yeah, so keep that in mind. There's just this list of an unimplemented components that I use to then, actually, let's see where that's being used. So let's just highlight this. There we go. So I'm rendering a component list, and that component list eventually trickles down and becomes part of the view, a very, very big part of the view. There's a lot of boilerplate here. So like for everything that is implemented, I have to call the view. So for example, for alert, I have to call the view, pass in the model for the alert, and then I have to map the message that the view emits into a message that the router would understand, or like that it would fit in with. And so like if anyone watching this has any idea on how to simplify this and make this less boilerplatey, I'd really appreciate that, because right now, yeah, like this I would say is like one of the things that's kind of like annoying right now with this project. It's just it's not the most fun part. But anyways, it is what it is. And let's see what else is there. So there's converting a component category. So component category is just a way to split apart all the different components, or like organize them. So you'll see there's data display, data entry, feedback, etc. So this is just turning it into something that can be rendered onto the DOM. Then there's a URL parser. I wouldn't really worry about this. I'm going to just fly through anything URL related. And I mean, that's basically it. I wanted to just talk about the router because it might not be intuitive to people initially. Like they might look for a main file and the main file is not there. So I covered that, and then I wanted to cover the router and explain how this is like the meat and potatoes of the application. Is there anything else I want to cover? It'd be nice if I was doing a live stream and then I could get people to tell me if there's anything I missed. But if there is anything I missed, you can comment on the video and just let me know. Oh, actually, container is actually something to cover. So the container, I should probably document this. The container.elm file contains a like utilities to create these demo boxes. So each of these demo boxes is created through container. So you'll see that there's a function called create demo box. And there's two kinds of demo boxes. There's a stateless demo box. So let me see if there's an example I can find. Okay, this one emits messages, so no. Maybe alert. This one. Okay, so you can see that this doesn't emit any messages and it doesn't have a model. It's completely stateless. That one would be called, or we would create an initial model. So I think if I go to alert basic example, actually better yet, yeah, you can see that the basic example is a container that doesn't have any state, like the example itself doesn't have any state, and it also never emits any messages. Mind you, the box itself does have some state, like for example, you can toggle the viewing of the source code. Also, by the way, like the source code might not be loaded, so you need to handle that as well. So the box itself will always have some state, but the example that the box contains may or may not be stateful. So that's what this represents. And so in the routes folder, I'm rendering an alert component page, and then the alert component page has all these different examples. So you can see, for example, the closable example, which I haven't rendered because it's very buggy, does have its own state and it does emit messages. So that's all taken care of. Let's see here. So you would declare a stateful model or a stateless model. I won't get into too much detail about how this all works. You can read through it if you want to, but if you want to actually wire up one of these things, I would just recommend that you read through the code on any one of these pages. In fact, I think the alert page is pretty good because you have a few different examples of like how to do stateless containers or how to do stateful containers. I think that the button page also has, yeah, so you can see here that all of these examples, actually this one's completely stateless and doesn't emit any messages, but these two don't have state, but they do emit messages. And yeah, so like if you read through all these different pages or routes, you can see that there's these different examples of how to wire up these demos. I think that covers everything. And yeah, so I would really appreciate if you check out the project, maybe give it a star, maybe give the video a like, and I would appreciate any feedback. So if you didn't like this, please write me a comment. I'd really appreciate it, or any sort of ways to improve these videos. I'd really appreciate. Anyways, have a good rest of your day or night.